Hi everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a full house today, so thank you all so much for coming. I'm excited also for this topic. It's an interesting topic. So my name is Caitlin Ramirez, and I'm the director of the Zeeland Historical Society. And we are here today with one of our School Bell series. So our School Bell series features local speakers on local topics, kind of sharing history together. So Dave has been volunteering at the Historical Society for about a year now or so. And he is a very capable person who has been taking on more and more things for us. And one of the things he does is digitize our collection. So he takes some collections home and he scans them for us. And one of the things he worked on was a collection on the Interurban. So I asked him if he could put together a presentation with what he has learned through looking through that collection. And so this is what you're looking at today. So please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. The volume impresses me, and I hope I do justice to your travel here today. I need to start off with a favorite old poem I've heard. It applies to a conductor on a train. It says, "It's not my job to run the train. The whistle I don't blow. It's not my job to say how far the train's supposed to go. I'm not allowed to pull the brake or even ring the bell. But let the damn thing leave the track and see who catches hell." So we also have a beautiful little artifact here. This is an American Flyer engine that is in the Interurban design. It's got a transom up here. It's later in design because it's got a double pole and probably have a wide pickup on it for a double connection. But it is of the Interurban style. So thank you very much for bringing that. I appreciate it. So we're going to go back a couple of slides here. So the Interurban, it came and it went. It was here for about 25, 26 years. There were actually two Interurbans here in Holland. The initial Interurban started in Holland, and then within 2 years, it was extended and connected to Grand Rapids. So that is sort of the span that we're talking about here. In 1898, the Holland Interurban ran from where the Pangos station is today, on 8th and Lincoln, right down the middle of 8th Street, turned south on River to 13th, turned west on the 13th, went out to what we know as South Shore Road now, and meandered out to Macatawa. The next year, they put a switch in at Virginia Park and turned south and went down to Saugatuck. So that was the original Holland Interurban, Holland and Lake Michigan line. Within 2 years, Interurbans were the thing in the United States. People had streetcars and trolleys that were pulled by horses within cities, but the desire came to connect between cities, and it's interurbans. And so people started building interurbans. First one was really in Portland, Oregon, but soon followed by interurbans in the Boston area and down in Ohio. So that's sort of the background and the timeline of what we're going to be talking about here. So the first thing I want to do is thank the Zeeland Historical Society for asking me to do this. I'm a rail fan, so this is fun for me to do. These are some of the sources that I used to gather all these these slides. They're not individually sourced or noted on the slides, but you can see there's quite a bit of history on the Interurbans. So this is from Donovan Rankin's book. It's a great introduction. So before there were interstates, before there were highways even, before there were concrete roads, before there were many automobiles, there were the streetcars and the interurbans. So what is an interurban? It's electric. It's not steam. Up to that point, transportation was provided long distance by rail, by steam engines. A little bit of history on the steam engines coming up. There were overhead wires and an arm that picked up the power from the overhead arm, went through the motors and into the ground, which is the tracks on the ground. They ran mostly on the private right-of-way and mostly right down Main Street, USA, wherever they went, because that's where the people were. That's where people wanted to get on, that's where people wanted to get off. So Randy Vanderwater did a nice little book on Zeeland. There's a few pictures in here out of that book. This is an interesting picture. This is the cover of the book. And it sort of encapsulates the time period. Obviously, we could go on, but I'll do a lot of that today. The hay wagon coming down the street here. You've got the automobile. This has a brass radiator on it, which puts it before 1919, when Ford went over to put painting all just black. It was too much cost to put brass radiators in all the cars. You can see the tracks right down. You're looking east on Zeeland's Main Street. You see these trees here. We'll see them again. Those help focus your pictures as we go along. You'll see those trees again. And hidden right here on the side, this little shed-roof building, is the power plant. That's the Zeeland power plant. There was one in Jemison, one in Zeeland here, one in Holland. So but they needed to generate the power to run these. Oftentimes, the Interurban was the first electricity in the area. So the Interurban would run the power plant, and they would supply electricity to the businesses and homes along the way. So it was one of the attractions of an Interurban, as you could quote electrify your city. But it was direct current, DC current in most cases, but it was the first electricity in many cities and many areas. So let's just step back and what was going on in the world in 1898 when these things started. Well, 76 we had the Declaration of Independence. 89 we had the Constitution. 1812 was war with England. 1813 the Battle of Thames, where Tecumseh died. 1826 Jefferson and Adams both died simultaneously on the same day. And look at the date that they died. July 4th.
50th anniversary.
In 1830, the steam engine town Thumb is in Baltimore, and they ran it for 18 miles on track. It was very different from the steam engines you think about today. It had a vertical boiler and just a platform, and the guy stood on the platform and worked his levers, but it ran 18 miles. There was a race with the town Thumb. Some challenged him to a horse race, and the horse beat the town Thumb back. But that was the first practical demonstration of tracks and wheels and rails here in the U.S. Civil War, steam engines were very useful and popular, primarily in the north, to deliver supplies to people, the troops and whatnot. And in 1865, at the end of the war, lots of cities like Grand Rapids had streetcars on rails that were pulled by horses. Horses did okay, but they had trouble on inclines. If everybody knows Michigan Hill, Fulton Street Hill in Grand Rapids, they had trouble, the horses had trouble getting up the hills there. Also, in the late 1800s, there was an equine outbreak, and thousands of horses in each city died. So they ran out of horses to pull the trolleys. So that's sort of prompted things along here. We have trolley cars. This is in Oakland, California, but this little guy here ends up being the chief of police of Oakland, California. It just happened to be a fortuitous picture of his youth. This is in Battle Creek. The horse's name is Maud. And this is out in San Francisco. Notice the variety of cars. You've got a closed car here. You've got an open car here. So lots of different kinds of cars. This has got just 4 wheels on it. And we'll see some examples going on from there. Zeeland Main Street, 1895. Horse, buggy, wooden sidewalks. I think they would have learned after the fire of 1871. But it was cheaper than pouring concrete. So that's an era picture. There were lots of railroads. Railroads were not profitable. They were interesting, they were attractive, but it took a lot to make a railroad run. There was a lot of investment, there was a lot of resentment, local opposition to running railroads. So there were a lot of startups, there was a lot of railroads that were started and never laid a yard of rail, just because they didn't put the finances together. But it was a very attractive idea. But there weren't very many good businessmen that made it run. So the Chicago and West Michigan Railroad was one of the first ones here in Holland. Well, here in Holland. I'll probably slip up and say that again, even though we're in Zeeland. There was the Michigan-Indiana Railroad that ran from Indiana up to Grand Rapids. There was the Flint and Pere Marquette, the Grand Rapids and Western Railroad, all got combined. There was the Lakeshore Southern Railroad, and there were electric railroads. These three merged to become the Holland and Chicago Railway, which was the main line from Grand Rapids to Holland to Sawyer. Bless you. Thank you. So there were a lot of other Michigan railroads as well. There was Grand Rapids, Grand Haven, and Muskegon, Houghton County, way up in the Upper Peninsula, Detroit, Monroe, and Toledo. Lots of railroads, lots of railroad activity going on, and lots of names and lots of mergers going on. So let's stop a minute and see, who was Frank Sprague? Anybody know that name? Okay, a couple of people, great. He was Mr. Motor. He worked for a year for Thomas Edison and was very interested in electricity. And he went on to sort of perfect the winding and building of electric motors. But he took those motors and went a lot of places with them. He started, we'll see, Virginia, Interurban. It was popular, instrumental in the New York subway system, the London subway system, they call it Tube, as well as other cities. and really quite an unsung hero. The reason people don't know his name as well as Edison is that he worked for these people, and he worked for General Electric, and all their patents went in the company name rather than in his name. But he was really the inventor of these things. He was a very good engineer, and his design style was to make things very robust and solid so that they worked very well. He wasn't always the first with something, but he always made something that was very strong and robust. So we did a lot of things here. I guess we don't need to go through all of them. He worked for Edison, started his own company, Sprague Electric and Motor Company. He went to the Philadelphia Exposition in 1884 and got a lot of notoriety for his motors. We'll see a picture here. There was a 200-foot alley that he got in New York City. It was a flat car with 4 wheels. That's what he built his first prototype on. His Interurban or
He's in the building
Right.
Everybody okay? One of his interesting quotes is that 500 volts is the highest that Mr. Sprague allows because more would be apt to cause serious personal inconvenience. In the case of touching. So this is that alley, and this is that flat car. And he built a little track, and he built this car, and some controls up here, but the motors and things were underneath. And to show people that this electric could run, he'd have them sit here on the car with him on these boxes and run. One of the fellows that he was interested in investing was Jay Gould, who was a railroad tycoon and had a lot of money. And so Jay Gould and Sprague were sitting here on the car, and he was starting to run it. And Sprague wanted to impress him with the speed with which he could accelerate the motors. There he goes, full throttle. And right in front of them, in this little hole here, a fuse box, poof! The fuse blew up right in front of Jay Gould there. Needless to say, Jay Gould did not invest. He scared away his investor, literally. This was the basic structure underneath that car. There were motors that were tied to gears, that were tied to gears around the wheel. One of the problems was that he solved was that when he hit bumps, the motors and things would come off the track. So what he did is he designed or he invented what they called the wheelbarrow effect. He tied the motor to the axle here, and he let the motor bounce up and down. The motor itself would go up and down, but it would stay tied to the axle and would stay caught in the gears here, so there was a continuous motion. But an invention for moving the industry at that time along, which wasn't much of an industry at the time. There's a picture of Frank when he was 73. Looks like a guy who loved me. This is one of the first trolley cars. Notice a pole up here on top. The wire came up electricity, but it was on 4 wheels here, and it was dependent upon who sat where. So it moved, but it might have been a little frightening. There were other designs. There were double deckers. They said, well, we've only got one set of wheels, on top, and we could just pull it along. Didn't last very long, but it was one design. So what's happening in the state of Michigan? Steam railroads were being built at the same time. First railroad came to Holland in 1870, just before the fire. And railroads were, this is out to the East Coast, here's Michigan here, but the railroads through New Jersey, Baltimore, railroads up here. This is railroad from New York City to Albany, over to Buffalo, and Raleigh. Would have taken the train from New York when he got here in 1847, up to Albany, over to Buffalo, on a steamer late in the season, and made it to Detroit. They didn't get there before the Upper Lakes froze. So they spent time in Detroit in the winter, took the train to Kalamazoo, and walked from Kalamazoo up to Allegan to meet Judge Kellogg and other folks. Kellogg showed him the area of Black Lake here, and they decided to stay here rather than go to Iowa or Wisconsin. But you can see where the railroads were. Railroads in Michigan, they were new. The state was new in 1837. They said, well, we need 3 railroads. We need a southern route, we need a middle route, and we need a northern route from Detroit to Ludington. And that should take care of the railroad needs of the state of Michigan. There was nothing north of Lansing except woods. They barely spell a UP at the time. So that's sort of the steam railroad environment. This is a map of the interurbans. I date this map from 1895. And the reason I date that from 1895 is this little connection right here on the north side of Nakatola. You know why that 1895 comes to mind for that little section of interurban or railroad?
Is that when they opened the Ottawa Beach?
Exactly. Ottawa Beach Hotel in 1893. And the initial passage to the Ottawa Beach Hotel was through a steamship that left Holland and sailed right down the lake to the hotel. There was lots of competition, and lots of people got on board the boat. There was 400 passengers. They started Nakatola side, wanted people too, but there were other boats, and there was this fighting over the steamship wars going from Holland down the lake. So the Chicago and West Michigan said, well, we'll fix that. We'll build a road out from Holland out to the lake. One of the places they had to get permission from was from Hope College, because Hope College owned Superior Point, and that had land out there. So in April of '93, they met with Hope College, and Hope College granted them right-of-way permission to go across their land out there out to Ottawa Beach. So the interurban started from Grand Rapids, started right there in Grand Rapids. Well, that's the city limit. City limits were important to these people, and the trolley cars in the cities didn't want the competition from the electric railroads. Or if the cities had electrified, they wanted to keep their electrification to themselves. They'd done the investment. Why should the other people ride on their rails? So between Holland, Zeeland, Grand Rapids, these folks needed to get permission from the city to enter and establish their railroad. A lot of haggling going on, and in Grand Rapids they ended up with call it a ride share sharing arrangement, fare sharing arrangement. Out of the 7 cents that it would cost you to go from Grand Rapids to Holland, the city of Grand Rapids. The Grand Rapids Railroad Company got 3 cents of that 7 that allowed them to go into Grand Rapids and down right to Camp Ball Square in the middle and turn around. So a lot of haggling. So this is the route that went through Granville, through Jenison, down by Hudsonville, Jamestown, Zeeland, Zeeland, into Holland, down 8th Street, down the road, down the lake here to Virginia Park, out to Macatawa, you see the loop there, and then down to Saugatuck. There was this little piece that went over here. This is the original route here, and they added one more line because they wanted to go through Castle Park. There was money in Castle Park, so they wanted to pick up the workers. Those were people that could afford to take a vacation and ride the Interurban. So the Holland Interurban came in 1898 to Macatawa Park, 1899 to Saugatuck. So what were the factors? Why would anybody want to build an interurban? What audience participation times, suggestions? Anybody have any ideas? Ken?
They were clean.
They were clean.
The steam engines, you got smoke, you got enters the rest of the stuff. The Interurban was clean.
Clean transportation. Any ideas?
It's got, I mean, investment to make money.
Make money? Yes. True.
They could run more often.
They could. They were very frequent runners. Yes?
It was probably cheaper to buy a ticket to go a short distance than to go a long distance.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, like I said, 7 cents. Yeah. We think of that today, but that was still a pretty cheap fare ride compared to trains.
Well, the basic underwriter for the Michigan system was consumers' power. And consumers put money up. Other people technically were the operators and owners, but consumers were selling the electric.
The big investors were actually in Boston. There were local people here, senior vice presidents and whatnot, but the big money, if you will, came as investments out of Boston.
And you highlight the other is that the interurbans would build tractors near the end of their line, if people could ride their line. So it was a combination of just regular fare, but also weekend holiday outings.
Right, absolutely. Macatawa Park, Jenison Electric Park, and people wanted to get to the beach, and the farmers wanted to sell their beets, their wheat, their corn. They wanted to move it to market. The first line went from here right down to Macatawa Park. Notice that Jenison Park is not here at the time, but this is a picture of a proposed line. This was in the proposal for this line. But Jenison Electric Park got started in about 1897, and the big investors in Jenison Electric Park were the owners of the Chicago and West Michigan Railroad, as well as the Jenison brothers out of Jenison. And they built this park, and the railroad says, well, let's get people down there. So the Chicago and West Michigan people already knew about rails. So this was an impetus for the Holland Interurban line. The people needed to get to the park, so let's give them a way to get there. So they built the Interurban and came to Jenison Park initially, and then right immediately to Macatawa Park after. This is the cover of Lois's book. But you can see right here, what do we have? We got 4 Interurban cars stopping at the pavilion. So here's view of Jennison Electric Park. And what's in the picture? The Interurban, right down the Macatawa. See the enormous size of the Macatawa Yacht Club? This is the famous figure 8 here, and all the amusements along the way, the merry-go-round. This was, there were cottages back here. And in the late 1800s, people with money vacationed from Chicago. They packed their trunks, they got on the steam engine, they came to Holland, they got on a taxi, a wagon, a horse-pulled wagon, and they came out here and they stayed for 3 months. It was difficult to move all of your trunks and things. It was nice weather, it was a nice place to stay, the beach was there, the weather was good. So they stayed for 3 months. So that was the way they traveled, because that's the way the trains ran, and that's the way people lived at that time. Now, these cottages here were a destination for those folks. And now, with the Interurban, people from Holland and Saugatuck can come for the day. They don't have to pack a trunk or two for 3 months. They can come whenever they want, get on the train, and end up here. So, Jennison Park and the Interurban were intertwined financially. It was a good thing to get to the park, and it was a good money maker for them initially. This is the first train in the Interurban in Holland, 4th of July, 1898. Quite an event. Got on board and rode out to the lake, along the lake. This is Jennison Park. See where the tracks are, right? People getting on, getting off. It was, this is a postcard of the era. They colorized things. So this was the dock at Jennison Park. This is the steamer, it looks like a Puritan. The steamer that would go from here over to Ottawa Beach into Chicago and back. Chicago's way over here. There's no train route. But this is a facility at Jennison Park to let people off the steamer to go to their cottages. This was the road to Macatawa. We said Michigan didn't have paved roads. Duh. So that was the way out to Macatawa at the time. These are some pictures of Macatawa Park. There's an urban loop here at Macatawa. You can see the peak over here of the Ottawa Beach Hotel. There's this dock out here, and the ships would dock out here. There's these little ferries that would run back and forth across here, from here into Ottawa. Looking west.
Going back to that picture,
Yep.
it almost looks like the the car is actually on a spur on the dock.
It may be, well, I don't know, this is pretty early, so I'm not sure they had the spur on the dock yet.
Okay.
Could be. There, in later pictures, we'll see the track actually runs out to the end of the dock.
Okay.
It could be from the position of the car. The loop went this way and around the building and back. But there could be a spur there for that. This is the Macatawa Hotel and Interlake Walk. My grandparents had a cottage down Interlake Walk here. There I shined shoes on the front steps of the cottage. This is the larger Grand Wharton line that went to Chicago, docked here at Macatawa. Here is track. This is the lake. They didn't have much room there. In the last few years, the water line might have been up to about here. But notice these cottages here. These are substantial cottages. They aren't little shacks. This is money from Chicago coming up here to camp and enjoy the summers. Notice the double track here. Another shot. Here's that spur that you were talking about that that car might have been on. And this is the loop around the track around here. This is a car in that loop. You went when you rode the Interurban, you dressed. I used to buy ice cream at this ice cream store. The line went to Saugatuck. After this was in 1898, 1899, went down here to Saugatuck. Saugatuck had a big pavilion down there. They had stations, this is a passenger station, along the way, pretty crude. Here's the ticket office in Saugatuck. And there was a trestle that they ran over. I'm not exactly sure where that trestle was built.
East of Zeeland. It was east of Zeeland.
No, this is on the Saugatuck line.
They had another one.
Yeah, we'll see that. So that's Holland and Saugatuck. But what about Zeeland? We're here for Zeeland, right?
Yeah.
So people loved it. Jennison Park was alive with traffic. Farmers could send their beets, wines, and vinegar to come in. So why can't we get to Grand Rapids? Well, lots of folks were interested. Benjamin Hanchett, he was an investor in Jennison Park, vice president of one of the railways, and they were working on it with Grand Rapids. Holland Interurban incorporated it in 1900 as the Holland, Lake Michigan Railway, Saugatuck and Douglas and Lake Shore Railway. It's a mouthful. The line to Grand Rapids was approved in June of 1900. They had the fare sharing arrangement, and it opened in stages. The first place it went was to Jennison, not Jennison Park, Jennison, Michigan. This is a photo op for the first trolley to go there. This guy here, the fourth, is Benjamin Hanchett. You saw his picture. But there were, when they got these contracts to build the railroads, there were completion clauses in it. You had to have it running by August 31st. You had to have it running by July 9th. You had to have it completed to Saugatuck by the end of September. If you didn't meet that, you forfeited everything that you put in. Big incentive to get these done. So, and part of that fulfillment, they made the first run to Jennison, so they could say the line was open partway. So this is a photo op. So the rest of the road westward was not quite so easy. This trestle is going over the Lakeshore and Southern Railroad in Granville. And so the Lakeshore and Southern would not allow the Interurban to cross at grade level. You can tunnel, or you can go over, your choice. But we're not going to allow you to cross. We're not going to interrupt our operations to let your train go by. So they built this trestle. Well, quite an impressive feat. This is how they built track. People with shovels, horses with wagons. That was it. They would shovel and grade and move dirt by hand. See here the photographer's hand holding up his flash.
Looks like they're got a some sort of a vehicle on the track back there.
Right, there probably is, to bring track in,
It looks like it's hand drawn.
track and ties. This is out on Byron Road. You see the graders, horse-drawn graders here. And these guys bring their horses back to get in line to grade track. The company hired farmers, because the farmers had the horses, the farmers had the wagons. And they would pay them $1 a day, or $2 a day. Farmer said, today I gotta go fertilize, they wouldn't show up. Well, how about if we give you $2 a day? There was always bidding and going on about who was going to show up. There was no steady workforce, but there was probably 300 or 400 men in any particular day working on a railroad. This is also on Byron Road. This is, I don't know the Wenzel family farm on Byron Center Road, but that's where this picture was taken. You can see they've got some steam here, some kind of a traction engine. But wagons hauling dirt, that's how they built roads. This is the best I could enhance the picture. This is Byron Road in Zeeland. We call this the Zeeland Swamp. But you can see the road going down and coming back up. This is the train track here. They had to fill this in with dirt to build that up so that they weren't subject to the grades and the swamp. You see the power poles coming down here to bring the power, and then the track come down here like this. You see all of this fill, all done by horse, wagon, and by hand. Well, you get across the Zeeland Swamp, and you got to come into the Holland Swamp. It's still a swamp to the east of the Marquette lines there in the Holland now to where the Windmill Island is, on the other side of that tracks. It's still swampy. Here they're laying the track without the ties initially, then they'll come back and they'll put the ties in. This guy here is spacing the rails so that they can lay the ties. This is water and mud and swamp. So the sinkhole was pretty obnoxious. They would fill it, lay track, home at night, and by the morning, the track was gone. Where did it go? Into the hole. It literally sank into the hole. Then they would come back the next day, back their car up as close as they could get to the back here, push dirt over the edge, push more dirt, fill it in, build it up, lay more track, and see if that would stay. This didn't happen once. This happened several times. Quite an obstacle to overcome. They would have to drive some 4,000 piles into the ground down to where they got solid ground. So they came along with a pile driver, and they would take poles, drive them into the muck at the bottom until they hit something solid. They would run the track out here, and you can see the pile driver driving more piles. This is one side of it. They had to lay 2 tracks. I keep mentioning double track because you wanted trains to pass. You couldn't start a train at one end and run it all the way to the other and then wait for it to come back and forth. You needed to pass each other. So one of the main investments in this line from Grand Rapids to Holland was that they had double track. So you could send trains every 20 minutes or a half hour and they could pass along the way. So we'll see more examples of double track. That was a big deal. It's like slicing bread. So here, in the end, is the double track laid out across the swamp on some of those piles. Once you're through the swamp, you weren't quite finished yet because you just got into Holland. So here in Holland, guess what? Would not allow the Interurban to cross their tracks at grade level. So instead of going over, we went under. So this is the tunnel. This is about 4th Street. Looking, I think this is looking east still. Your back is to Holland. But all of the construction was done by the Marquette Railroad. This is their track here. Two piles right there. These are temporary. There's only one track under here. But all of the work was done by the Marquette Railroad because it was their road that was being supported by this. The Interurban folks had to pay for it, but all the work was done and guaranteed by the Marquette folks. So this is in construction. They were building walls and things along the tracks here. This is a more complete section. You see they've installed a full girder bridge now to carry the weight of the train and track. We've got 2 tracks here. We've got interurban line power overhead is not in place yet, but we do have double tracks. So this is a finished width, and this is looking out into the swamp. So where did it go? Here's the tunnel up here. It came around like this, up here to 7th Street, 8th, and then they could get on the interurban track, the Holland interurban track, on 8th Street. These are the railroads here. These are the spurs. This is called a Y. This track here is for turning engines and turning cars. Bring a train from here up to this point, throw this switch, back the train around here, throw this switch, back this way, turn the train around. So that was quite a necessary piece of track in the steam engine era. I do not understand this drawing here. If they won't let them cross at grade level here, I'm not sure why they can cross at grade level on 7th Street.
It was the difference between being the main line, where they had to tunnel under, and being just the siding into the industrial area.
It may very well be that, but it's not drawn at grade level. So, it's kind of an anomaly in this picture. So, this is a picture of Zeeland. I gave you Zeeland natives to help me out with this. This is in the Zeeland archives. Here we've got a track going through Zeeland. I've only been here in Holland for 3 years. I don't know whether this is looking east or west. And I don't know whether this is interurban track or whether this is Pure Marquette. I don't know if you folks know the water towers or these tall buildings that are, I don't know if anybody knows these farms and where it would be.
So I think that's looking west towards the water tower.
Okay.
And I think at one point, the interurban ran more down Washington Avenue as opposed to Main Street. Main
Right.
Avenue.
But if this, so this is Main Street?
No, that's near Washington. And it's the picture is taken, I think, about where Colonial Clock Building across from Cityside School is, or the slide building.
Over here?
No, we're taking a picture from at the slide building,
Oh, here.
looking east. Yeah, I believe.
Well, any help would be appreciated. Yeah?
Yeah, I think there was a smokestack at the slide factory at one point, and that's how they got the elevation. But at one point later on, to get the tracks out of the middle of Main Street, they moved them to this parallel route, which is where the consumer's power power poles run. That's the route where the interurban later went.
Okay, so this is, well, but they only moved it half block.
Right, just to get it off the street.
Right, but half block, this is more than half a block. It's not. If this is Main, isn't that more than half a block?
It's about in the back of the stores on Main Avenue. It's not quite Washington.
Right.
So it's sort of between Washington and Main, sort of like right in back of where the stores are on Main.
But much closer to the main line, steam line.
Yes.
Here, Ken.
So, yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, Ken?
I've been told that the relief building that Zeeland Lumber uses, that's next to its building to the west, was at one point an interurban building. And I haven't researched it, I just.
Oh my gosh.
You're right, you're good.
So where did the electricity come from? It came from power plants, like this one on Main Street. You know, this shed roof here. This is Zeeland, this is what was inside. Coal-fired dynamos would produce the electricity and would go out on big wires like this up to the poles. So here's some pictures going through Holland. Notice this is 8th and River in Holland, looking east, and this double track down the center of 8th Street in Holland. So there were excursions where they would put 4th of July, or companies would come and take picnics for Founders Day or things like that. So they would hook up a bunch of cars and take people out to Jenison Park, or Macatolo. There's a colorized postcard of that same view from River. This is, again, 8th Street. So this is really the only picture we have. This is on River looking south towards 13th. And because of the number of cars, this is later on, after 1920-ish. So I'd make the turn on 13th and go out to Lakeshore Drive. So imagine you're down at Zeeland Food Services and you're coming west. Just as you're on the road, if you look to the right, just past the Zeeland welcome sign, you can look right down Main Street, right straight down. That's where this interurban ran. It came up the hill on Byron Road, went right, and went right down Main Street. So this is that view at that time. I'm a good way to show that. So you see, these trees here. We saw those pictures in that initial picture. So this is out west, Main Street here. This is in the summertime with those trees, still looking west. Now we get down and we're looking east. You see these trees way out here? See those? You can see the power station on Main Street. You can see the one set of tracks come down right down Main Street in Zeeland. Again, we've got a mixture of horse and buggy in our power plant. Trolleys in town, picking up people. Students who live in Zeeland, go to Hope, get on the interurban, ride into Hope. Business people would send their produce and things, put it on the back of the car, and send it to Zeeland and Grand Rapids.
Hey, Dave, could you explain why there's only a single track through Zeeland with a double track in Holland and what the implications of that were for the railway?
Maybe you can do that better than I. I think they only would allow a single track.
That's right, the city wouldn't allow it.
Wouldn't allow it.
So they had to work back to go back and forth. They would have to have double tracks on either side.
on the eastern side, out on Byron Road, they got double track. But when it came in here on Main Street, from the far end here, through the tunnel of trees, down here, it would go over the hill, the Peter Clausen brick hill, and down. And at some point, they picked up the double track when they went into the swamp. You saw the double track under in the tunnel. But then this is the single track here. It got moved a half a block north behind these buildings here. They bought the right of way from consumer. The consumer let them run the tracks right behind those buildings. You can still sort of see that if you're driving north on any one of the side streets like Elm or whatever. You can look and you can see where the power lines run. And that's where the Interurban ran.
So just to the left of the car there, that smokestack in the background, that's the one that earlier photo you were asking about was probably taken from in the distance. Yeah, right there.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, I see, okay. Great. So, another picture here. See, we've got an Intermix A-wagons. We got hitching